My father remarried when I was 17, and I told myself I could handle it. I was wrong. But before I get to that, before I get to the dinner, the documents, the moment I watched my uncle's wife realize she had made the worst mistake of her life, I need to tell you about my grandmother, because none of this makes sense without her. My grandmother, Nana Rose, raised me from the time I was 9 years old. My mother passed away from ovarian cancer in the spring of my 4th grade year, and my father, well, my father was not the kind of man who knew what to do with a grieving little girl. He tried for about 8 months. Then he stopped trying. He moved to Phoenix with a woman he met at a work conference, called me on Christmas and my birthday if I was lucky, and left me with his mother in a small house on Carver Street in Columbus, Ohio. I am not telling you this so you will feel sorry for me. I am telling you this because Nana Rose was the reason I became who I am. She worked 31 years as a licensed practical nurse at Riverside Methodist Hospital. She woke up at 5 in the morning without an alarm. She paid her bills the day they arrived. She kept a savings account that she added to every single month, no matter what, even when times were tight, even when the furnace broke 2 winters in a row and we ate a lot of soup. She called it her quiet money. She said, "Quiet money doesn't make noise, baby. It just sits there and grows, and one day it saves your life." She put me through nursing school, not with loans, with the quiet money she had been saving since before my mother was born. I graduated from Ohio State with my RN at 23. I started working in the cardiac ICU at a hospital in Columbus. I lived in a studio apartment 6 minutes from Nana Rose's house, and I had dinner with her every Sunday without fail. Those Sunday dinners were the best part of my week for years. Then my Uncle Gerald came back. Uncle Gerald was my father's younger brother. He had spent most of his 30s working on oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico, good money, irregular schedule, long stretches away. He and Nana Rose had a complicated relationship. He loved her, I think, but he was the kind of man who only showed up when things were easy. He missed holidays. He forgot birthdays. He called when he needed something and went quiet when he didn't. He came back to Columbus when he was 44, a little heavier, a little quieter, and with a woman named Deborah. Deborah was 41. She had 2 adult children from a previous marriage, a son named Marcus, who was 23, and a daughter named Kayla, who was 20. She was attractive in a very deliberate way, the kind of woman who always seemed to be performing composure. She smiled often, but her eyes were doing something different than her mouth. I noticed that the first night I met her, at a Sunday dinner where Uncle Gerald announced they were engaged, Nana Rose said, "Well, isn't that something?" And then she passed the green beans. I watched Deborah at that table. She looked around the house carefully, not the way a guest looks at family photos, but the way someone looks when they are trying to understand what things are worth. I filed that away. Uncle Gerald and Deborah married 6 months later. A small ceremony at the courthouse with a dinner afterward at a steakhouse on Broad Street. Nana Rose wore her blue dress and smiled in every photo. She pulled me aside in the restaurant bathroom and said, "Keep your eyes open, sweetheart." That was all she said. I didn't ask her to explain. For the first year, things were manageable. Deborah and Uncle Gerald moved into a house in Westerville, about 20 minutes away. They came to Sunday dinners, which Deborah seemed to find tedious. She spent most of them on her phone, or steering conversations toward what she and Gerald had been buying for the new house. A new sectional sofa, new appliances, a hot tub they were thinking about putting on the back deck. I noticed that Uncle Gerald had stopped talking about saving money. He had always been frugal from necessity, but he used to speak with a certain pride about his oil rig savings. That pride was gone. He seemed a little distracted, a little sheepish, like a man who had handed over something he wasn't sure he should have. The shift started small, the way these things always do. It was a Sunday in March, about 14 months after the wedding. Deborah arrived without Uncle Gerald, who she said was watching a game. She helped Nana Rose set the table. She lingered in the kitchen while I helped with the roast. And then, almost casually, she said, "Rose, have you ever thought about updating your will?" Nana Rose looked up from the counter. "I have a will." "Of course," Deborah said. "I just mean it might be worth revisiting. With Gerald settled now, a family structure, it might make sense to think about how everything is, distributed." Nana Rose said, "I think about it regularly. The lawyer helps me with that." Deborah smiled and let it go. But I stood at that stove and felt something cold move through me. On the drive home, I called my best friend Dana and told her what I'd heard. Dana said, Start writing things down. So I did. I bought a small notebook, nothing fancy, and I started keeping notes, dates, times, what was said, who was present. I kept it in my work locker at the hospital. Over the following months, Deborah's comments became more frequent, more pointed. She started talking about the family's future, a phrase I noticed she deployed whenever she wanted to suggest that Nana Rose's assets should be thought of collectively. She suggested that Nana Rose's house, which was paid off and had been in the family for 40 years, might be underutilized. She mentioned a cousin of hers who had done a reverse mortgage and really benefited. She told Uncle Gerald, loud enough that I could hear from the next room, that it wasn't fair that Nana Rose only had one person listed as her emergency contact when she had a whole family now. The emergency contact, of course, was me. I need to explain something about my finances because it becomes important. I had been working ICU for 6 years by then. Night shifts, holiday shifts, overtime when I could get it. I lived modestly. I drove a 7-year-old Civic. I brought lunch to work. I had built up a substantial savings account, not wealthy by any standard, but enough that if something happened to Nana Rose and I needed to take time off, I could. Enough that I had started a small investment account on the side. I had not told anyone in the family about this. Not Uncle Gerald. Certainly not Deborah. But somehow, Deborah found out. I still don't know exactly how. My best guess is that she saw a piece of mail at Nana Rose's house. I used Nana Rose's address for some accounts because my apartment building had a mail theft problem and I'd never gotten around to updating everything. When I moved, whatever the source, one Sunday in October she sat across from me at the dinner table and said, "You know, for someone in nursing, you're doing really well for yourself." She said it pleasantly. She was smiling, but her eyes were doing that thing again. I said, "I've been careful with money." She said, "That's so smart. You know, Marcus is trying to get his feet under him. It's so hard for young people today. It would mean so much to him, to all of us, really, if we could think of this family as a unit, people who support each other." I looked at Uncle Gerald. He was looking at his plate. I said, "I think I'll clear the dishes," and I went into the kitchen. That night I called my own bank and put a verbal password on my account. I also went online and made sure my mailing address was updated. I did not overreact. I did not confront anyone. I kept writing in my notebook. 3 weeks later, my bank sent me a fraud alert. Someone had called the bank's customer service line, identified themselves using my name and birthday, both of which Deborah could have easily known, and asked about the process for adding a joint account holder. The representative had flagged it because the caller couldn't answer the verbal password question. They locked the inquiry and sent me an alert. I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage after a 12-hour night shift and read that notification 3 times. Then I called the bank, confirmed the fraud attempt, filed a report, and asked them to note everything. The representative told me I should consider a full security freeze across all accounts and suggested I contact the major credit bureaus as well. I did all of it that same afternoon before I slept. I did not call Deborah. I did not call Uncle Gerald. I did not say a word at Sunday dinner. I called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Owens, and she specialized in elder law and estate matters, but she also dealt with financial fraud cases. I found her through a colleague at work whose family had gone through something similar. I met with her on a Tuesday afternoon and brought my notebook, the bank fraud alert, and every piece of documentation I had been quietly collecting for almost a year. Patricia read through everything carefully. She said, "You've done exactly the right things." She said the fraud alert alone was significant. An attempt to access someone else's account by impersonating them is a crime. She said if Deborah had also been accessing or attempting to access Nana Rose's financial information, that would compound things considerably. I asked her what I should do next. She said, "Keep documenting, and let's make sure your grandmother has everything she needs to protect herself as well." I had a conversation with Nana Rose that I had been putting off. I drove to Carver Street on a Wednesday morning, made coffee, and sat down at the kitchen table where I had done my homework for years. I told her everything. I showed her the notebook. I showed her the bank alert. Nana Rose was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I knew something was off. I just didn't want to believe Gerald was part of it." I told her I didn't think Uncle Gerald was directing it. I thought he was passive, which wasn't innocent exactly, but it was different from what Deborah was doing. Nana Rose called Patricia Owens herself that afternoon and made an appointment. She updated her will. put a freeze on her own credit, added additional security to her bank accounts, and made sure I was the only person with power of attorney. She did all of this without telling Uncle Gerald or Deborah. I want to be careful here, because I know what some people are thinking. I know some of you are asking why I didn't just confront Deborah directly. Why I didn't sit Uncle Gerald down and say, "Your wife tried to get into my bank account." And I understand that impulse. I felt it constantly. I am a direct person by nature. There were Sundays when I sat across from Deborah at that table and had to consciously keep my hands still in my lap. But here is what working in the ICU for years teaches you. You do not act on adrenaline. You act on information. You wait until you know exactly what you're dealing with, and you do not show your hand until the moment matters. So I waited. The moment came in February. Nana Rose called me on a Thursday evening, and her voice was tighter than usual. She told me that Deborah had stopped by that afternoon unannounced, while Uncle Gerald was at work. She had brought flowers and a coffee cake, which Nana Rose said was a first. She had asked if she could use the bathroom and been upstairs for what seemed like a long time. After she left, Nana Rose went upstairs and found that the drawer of her bedside table where she kept, among other things, a folder of financial documents was not fully closed. I asked if anything was missing. Nana Rose said she didn't think so, but the folder had been moved. I told her not to leave any financial documents in the house. I drove over that night, and we went through everything together. I took the documents that mattered and put them somewhere safe. The following week, Nana Rose's financial advisor called her to confirm a meeting she had not scheduled. Someone had called his office, identified themselves as Nana Rose, and booked a consultation about restructuring accounts to include family members. The advisor had called Nana Rose directly to confirm something he always did as a security protocol and was alarmed when she said she hadn't made any such call. He reported it. Nana Rose reported it to Patricia. I documented everything. Patricia said we had enough. Here is what enough looked like. One confirmed bank fraud attempt with a documented alert. One financial advisor appointment made by an impersonator. One instance of unauthorized searching through private financial documents in a residence, and 11 months of written notes documenting a sustained pattern of behavior designed to gain access to and control over the finances of both me and my grandmother. Patricia drafted 2 sets of legal documents. One was a cease and desist letter addressed to Deborah, outlining every documented incident and making clear in plain language what the legal consequences of continued behavior would be. The second was a formal notification to Uncle Gerald that we were prepared to pursue criminal charges for financial fraud and elder financial exploitation if necessary. We did not mail them. I called Uncle Gerald and told him I would like to have everyone over for dinner. I said I wanted to celebrate Nana Rose's 74th birthday, which was coming up in a few weeks. I said I was cooking everything myself. I told him to bring Deborah. He sounded pleased. He said Deborah would love that. He said it was good that we were all finding our way as a family. I said, I think this dinner will be really clarifying for everyone. I cooked for most of the day. Roast chicken because that was always Nana Rose's preference. Roasted vegetables. A birthday cake with lemon frosting. I set the table with the good placemats. I put flowers in the center. I made everything look like exactly what it appeared to be. A warm family dinner. Patricia was not at the dinner, but her documents were in a manila envelope on the kitchen counter, visible, but not announced. They arrived at 6. Deborah was wearing a bright blouse and carrying a bottle of wine. She hugged me at the door and said everything smelled wonderful. Uncle Gerald hugged Nana Rose and called her the birthday girl. We sat down. We ate. Deborah talked about redecorating the guest room. Uncle Gerald talked about a fishing trip he was planning. Nana Rose talked about the daffodils coming up in the front yard. And then, when I brought the birthday cake to the table, I placed the manila envelope beside Nana Rose's plate. Deborah looked at it. Something shifted in her face, not fear, not yet, but a kind of heightened attention. The way someone looks when they sense the ground has changed. I sat down. I said, before we have cake, there's something we need to talk about as a family. Uncle Gerald looked at the envelope. He looked at Nana Rose. He looked at me. I said, Deborah, in the past year, someone attempted to access my bank account by impersonating me. Someone impersonated Nana Rose to schedule a meeting with her financial advisor to discuss restructuring her accounts. Someone went through Nana Rose's financial documents in her bedroom without permission. I paused. I kept my voice even. I had practiced this part. We have documentation of all of it. We have a lawyer. And those documents in front of Nana Rose outline what happens next if this continues. The room was very quiet. Deborah said, "I don't know what you're talking about." I said, "Deborah? Just her name." That was all. Uncle Gerald looked at his wife. I watched him look at her. I watched him look in the way a person looks when they are hoping to be told something that will let them stay comfortable. And instead, they see the truth sitting right there in front of them. He said, "Deborah." She said, "Gerald, this is..." He said, "Stop." That was the whole conversation. Almost. He said, "Stop." And she stopped. Patricia had told me that people in these situations often do not admit anything directly. That wasn't the point. The point was that they needed to understand what we had, and what we were prepared to do with it. The point was the documents, the cease and desist, the clear accounting of what had been done and what would follow if it continued. Deborah signed the cease and desist that evening. Her hand was not steady. Uncle Gerald signed a separate acknowledgement that he had been made aware of the situation and understood the legal implications going forward. I served the birthday cake. Nana Rose blew out her candles. She had asked me not to put 74 of them on there, so I put 3, one for each decade and one for luck. She closed her eyes before she blew them out, and I don't know what she wished for, but when she opened her eyes, she looked lighter than she had in months. Uncle Gerald and Deborah left shortly after. He hugged Nana Rose at the door. He did not hug me, but he stopped on the front porch and said, quietly, "I'm sorry, Claire." I should have paid more attention. He couldn't quite look at me when he said it. I thought about all the Sundays he had looked at his plate. I thought about Nana Rose saying she didn't want to believe he was part of it. I said, "I know." I meant it. It wasn't enough to fix things between us, not right away, but it was a start. Deborah did not apologize. She walked to the car without looking back, and I watched her go from the porch, and I felt something settle in my chest that had been tightly wound for almost a year. I want to tell you the part that matters most, the part I think about when I have a long shift, and the night gets heavy, and I'm running on bad coffee and determination. About 3 weeks after that dinner, I was sitting with Nana Rose on a Sunday afternoon. The windows were open, and it smelled like spring for the first time. She was telling me about a patient she'd cared for years ago, back in her LPN days, a man who had been in the hospital for months, and whose family had stopped coming. She used to bring him a newspaper every morning and read him the sports section, whether he wanted her to or not. She said by the time he was discharged, he was a devoted baseball fan. She said, "You know what the quiet money is really for, baby?" I said, "Tell me." She said, "It's not for emergencies." Not really. Those are just the practical things. The quiet money is for freedom. It means nobody can make you do something wrong because you're desperate. It means you get to choose. She folded her hands in her lap. "I raised you to choose." I have thought about that every day since she said it. I am not in contact with Deborah. Uncle Gerald and I are in a careful, slow process of rebuilding something, not what we had, because what we had was built on me not knowing certain things about him. Something new, more honest. He and Deborah are still married, which is his choice to make and not mine to judge. But she is not welcome at Carver Street, and he knows that, and he comes alone on Sundays now. Nana Rose is 74 years old, and in excellent health, and fully in possession of her quiet money, and her good sense, and her lemon cake recipe. And I kept the notebook. I have it in my work locker still, filled with dates and times and careful notes about a year when I learned that protecting the people you love sometimes looks like patience. Sometimes it looks like documentation. Sometimes it looks like a birthday dinner with a manila envelope sitting next to the cake. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply wait until the moment is right, and then let the truth sit down quietly at the table with everyone else.